There was a man, born on a tiny island, mocked for his accent, laughed at by his classmates, and dismissed by nearly everyone around him. And yet, within just 2 decades, he would sit at the center of the most powerful empire the modern world had ever seen. Kings would tremble at the mention of his name. Entire nations would fall to their knees before him. He didn't inherit a throne. He didn't come from royalty. He built everything from nothing. And then, in one of the most dramatic collapses in all of human history, he lost it all. This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who almost ruled the entire world. Welcome back to Timeless Chronicles, the place where history stops being a boring list of dates and becomes the greatest story ever told. If you're new here, you picked the perfect video to start with. And if you've been with us from the beginning, you already know we don't do history lessons. We do history the way it deserves to be told. Now, before we go any further, I need you to understand something. Napoleon's story is not just a story about war and conquest. It is a story about a human being who refused to accept the limits the world placed on him. A man who rewrote the rules of power, strategy, and ambition so completely that even today, over 200 years later, military academies still study his tactics. World leaders still reference his decisions, and historians still debate whether he was a genius or a madman. Maybe he was both. Let's go back to where it all began. Before we go further, if you're already feeling this story, go ahead and tap that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because we cover stories exactly like this one every single week. And drop a comment below. I want to know, do you think Napoleon was a hero or a villain? Let's get that debate going. The year is 1769. On the small Mediterranean island of Corsica, a boy is born into a family of minor Italian nobility. Not French nobility, not rich, not powerful, just a family with a name and very little else. His name? Napoleon Bonaparte. When he was sent to school in France, the other children laughed at him. His accent was foreign. His French was poor. He was small, he was awkward, and he had absolutely nothing that would make you point at him and say, that boy will change the world. But here's the thing about Napoleon that most people miss. While the other children were laughing at him, he was reading, studying, thinking, military history, mathematics, strategy. He consumed knowledge the way most people consume food. And slowly, quietly, something dangerous was forming inside that small, awkward boy. A belief, a deep, unshakable belief that he was destined for something far greater than the life the world had planned for him. By the time Napoleon was in his mid-20s, France was tearing itself apart. The French Revolution had turned the country upside down. The king had been executed. The government was unstable, and chaos was spreading across Europe like wildfire. Into that chaos stepped Napoleon. His military genius became impossible to ignore almost immediately. At just 26 years old, he was given command of the French army in Italy, a force that was underfunded, underfed, and completely demoralized. Within months, he had turned them into a fighting force that shocked all of Europe. He didn't just win battles. He won them in ways nobody had seen before. He moved faster than anyone thought possible. He thought differently. He outmaneuvered his enemies before they even realized a battle had begun. And the French people? They fell in love with him. Here was a man from nothing, rising on pure talent and will. In a country that had just torn apart its aristocracy, Napoleon felt like proof that the old rules no longer applied. By 1799, he had done something that seemed impossible just years earlier. Through a combination of political brilliance and military reputation, he took control of the French government in a coup. And by 1804, in one of the most theatrical moments in European history, he crowned himself Emperor of the French in Notre Dame Cathedral, not waiting for the Pope to place the crown on his head. He took the crown with his own hands and placed it on his own head himself. The message was unmistakable. No one gave me this power. I took it. At his peak, Napoleon controlled more of Europe than any ruler since the Roman Empire. France, Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, large parts of Germany and Poland, all either under his direct control or ruled by members of his own family, whom he had placed on various thrones across the continent. He reformed the legal systems of every territory he touched. The Napoleonic Code, the legal framework he created, still influences the laws of dozens of countries today, including France, Belgium, Quebec, and Louisiana. He modernized governments, built roads, reformed education, and restructured economies. His supporters saw him as the living embodiment of the Enlightenment, the man who was dragging Europe out of feudalism and into the modern world. But here's where the story gets complicated. Because Napoleon was not just a reformer. He was also hungry, always hungry, for more territory, more control, more legacy. And that hunger was about to lead him to make decisions that even his most loyal generals could not understand. For all his genius, Napoleon had one fatal blind spot. He believed that his will alone could override reality. And nowhere did that belief destroy him more completely than in Russia. In 1812, Napoleon did something that military historians still shake their heads at. He invaded Russia with an army of over 600,000 men, the largest military force ever assembled in European history up to that point. His plan was simple: march into Russia, force Tsar Alexander to a decisive battle, win, and bring Russia to its knees. But Russia had a different plan. They retreated. Over and over again, they pulled back, drawing Napoleon deeper and deeper into the Russian interior, burning crops, destroying supplies, leaving nothing for the French army to live off. And Napoleon, refusing to accept that this wasn't working, kept following them. He reached Moscow in September of 1812, expecting a Russian surrender. Instead, he found a city on fire. The Russians had burned their own capital rather than let him have it. Napoleon sat in a burning Moscow for 5 weeks waiting for a peace offer that never came. And then winter arrived. What happened next was one of the most catastrophic retreats in military history. Temperatures dropped to levels that soldiers from Western Europe had never experienced. Horses collapsed and died. Men froze where they stood. The army that had marched into Russia with over 600,000 men limped back out with fewer than 100,000. Napoleon's legend had its first major crack, and his enemies across Europe felt it. Within 2 years, nearly every major power in Europe had united against France. Britain, Prussia, Austria, Russia. All of them at the same time. It was the kind of coalition that Napoleon had spent his entire career preventing. And now it was happening. In April 1814, Napoleon was forced to abdicate. He was exiled to the island of Elba, a tiny island off the coast of Italy. From emperor of half the world to prisoner on an island. The fall was almost too dramatic to believe. But Napoleon was not done. Not yet. Within 10 months, he escaped from Elba, landed in France, and marched toward Paris. And here is the part that tells you everything you need to know about this man. The soldiers sent to arrest him, when they saw him walking toward them alone, put down their weapons and joined him. He walked all the way to Paris without firing a single shot. The king fled the city. Napoleon was back. It lasted 100 days. At the Battle of Waterloo in June 1815, Napoleon was finally and permanently defeated. This time, he was exiled to St. Helena, a remote island in the South Atlantic, thousands of miles from Europe. There would be no escape from this one. He died there in 1821 at the age of 51. Here is what I want you to sit with. Napoleon Bonaparte rose from absolute obscurity to control half of the known world. Not through birthright, not through wealth, through pure, relentless ambition and a level of strategic brilliance that the world had never seen before and has rarely seen since. He reshaped nations. He rewrote laws. He changed the way wars were fought, the way governments were run, and the way ordinary people thought about what was possible for someone like them. And in the end, it was not an enemy that truly defeated him. It was himself. His refusal to know when enough was enough. His inability to stop reaching. Some people call him a tyrant. Others call him the greatest leader who ever lived. Most honest historians will tell you he was both. But one thing is undeniable. For one brief, blazing moment in history, one man came closer to ruling the entire world than almost anyone ever has. And he did it starting from nothing. If this story moved you even a little, please take a second to like this video. It genuinely means everything to a channel like this. Subscribe to Timeless Chronicles so you never miss a story like this one. And tell me in the comments below, what do you think was Napoleon's greatest mistake? Was it Russia? Was it Waterloo? Or was it simply that he never knew when to stop? I'll see you in the next chapter of history.